Thank you for joining us for Let's Talk, conversations for and about advanced practice. We interview those innovators, creators, paradigm changers of nursing and health. Today we are interviewing Dr. Bonnie Clipper, DNP, MA, RN, CENP, FACHE on her career and work as a leader and innovator in technology. As Chief Clinical Officer with WAMBI, Bonnie brings the thought leadership, nurse innovation, and strategic partnership to the platform to enable patients and clinicians to experience care the way it was meant to be, person to person. Bonnie is an expert in the nurse innovation space and was the first Vice President of Innovation for the American Nurses Association and created the innovation framework that is inspiring 4 million registered nurses to participate in innovation to transform healthcare. Bonnie has spent more than 20 years in executive nursing roles and is a top nurse influencer in LinkedIn. She speaks internationally on radical collaborations and the impact of emerging technologies on nursing practice. Dr. Clipper is a Robert Wood Johnson Foundation Executive Nurse Fellow alumni and an ASU AONE Executive Fellow in Health Innovation Leadership alumni. I feel I have done you a disservice to distill your resume to this one paragraph, but I will share links with my readers and our audience. Please tell the audience about WAMBI. Tell them about the product and your work with WAMBI.
Sure thing, it'd be my pleasure. Thank you very much, by the way, for having me on your show today. I appreciate that. It's always fun. So I am the Chief Clinical Officer at WAMBI. We are a very, very unique platform. There is currently nothing like us out there. We actually do 3 amazing things. Through the real-time direct feedback of patients and families, essentially we are chipping away and reducing clinician burnout, improving employee engagement, and enhancing the patient experience. So essentially what we're able to do is we are device agnostic, so patients and families can provide feedback or recognition, even utilize our platform for ratings of their healthcare team members or the employees of maybe the hospital or the clinic where they're receiving care. And that feedback, when it's favorable feedback, it goes right on through to the care providers, the clinicians, the nurses, the physicians, anyone, so that they can see in real time what the patients and families have to say. And you know, when we go into organizations, so often people get nervous because they're not sure they want to hear the feedback. However, I would tell you well over 90% of the time, the feedback is gratitude. It's incredibly positive. Patients and families are grateful for what caregivers are doing. If the comments are less than positive, they will go to a manager, and the manager will actually take a look at what's going on in that particular scenario and have some kind of a conversation later, if that's necessary, with the caregiver. So it's a really unique platform. It's incredibly positive, and the organizations that use us love us, and we're continuing to grow. So it's been a blast.
And about how many organizations use you at this point?
You know what? I don't even know that number, because in the last month, in February, that number's actually changed. So we continue to scale and grow, and it's actually been a lot of fun.
That's great. Then I read your autobiography and I was suitably impressed. I don't know how you got all of these different certifications and masters, but I want to know, how did you come to work in this space? How do you merge this work in executive leadership, technology, and nursing into being an innovator and a futurist?
Yeah, you know, that's a great question. So I have always been interested in technology. And, you know, just like many of us in nursing, we're all educated in a pretty traditional framework. And we kind of go through the process of being a nurse, knowing that when you graduate, you should work at the bedside in med surg. You can go into ICU, you can go into women's care, you can go into an OR, you can go into the ED. After you do that, you can move along to become an advanced practice nurse or an educator or get into leadership. So I followed a lot of those traditional routes. I actually gave care for several years at the bedside as a med-surg nurse, moved into the ICU. I knew that I wanted to make an impact in nursing. So I realized very quickly that you had to be a leader to do that. So I got myself back in school, pursued kind of leadership opportunities. I was a manager, I was a director, I became a chief nursing officer. I was in a chief nurse executive type role for nearly 20 years. Through near towards the end of that 20 years, I had the amazing opportunity to become a Robert Wood Johnson Foundation Executive Nurse Fellow. That was a golden experience for me because it opened a lot of doors and showed me what nurses could do. So through that, I really became very passionate around innovation and actually took advantage of learning as much as I could about not only technology, but innovation, what it meant. And as I got into it, I learned that nurses weren't in that space. So at the time this was 5 years ago, I was one of literally a handful of nurses with this kind of background in the country to really understand how do we bring more nurses in? How do we teach them about innovation? How can we get them engaged in innovation? How can we help them advance their ideas, advance their work, secure funding? How can we bring nurses in to change and design and develop better processes and workflows and technology to not only help provide patient care, but to help us? So it's been a very fun space. I've actually am super proud that I facilitated the largest hackathons in healthcare. The hackathon at the American Nurses Association was 850 nurses. Facilitated the event with Sigma Theta Tau, which was actually 170 people, nurses. And also I'm doing the one for ACHE at their Congress as well. So those are amazing opportunities, and I get to bring this passion to clinicians and nurses that want to learn how to provide some collaborative problem-solving ideas and make things better.
Well, you talk about nurses being natural innovators, and you talk about them in the workarounds. I have an appreciation for that because that's one of the things I tell people as a lawyer is that nurses know how to work around. Not only do they know how to work around, they also know how to delegate.
Nurses, right? We're smart people. We know a lot of stuff. So we are able to balance multiple balls in the air. At the same time, we can do a lot of juggling. We're very good at delegating, as you said, and we're incredibly powerful critical thinkers and problem solvers. So when you pull all those pieces together and couple with that the fact that we know all the workflows, right? Literally from the time a patient and a family enter the system till they leave the system, we know all the workflows across the continuum of care. We spend more time with patients and families than any other discipline. We're incredible problem solvers and innovators, yet it's unfortunate because we don't really use that word to describe ourselves. When I present, and I've done this now 40 plus times over the last couple of years, I ask nurses, raise your hand if you're an innovator. And I was actually, just Tuesday, did the same thing. I said, raise your hand if you're an innovator. I got about 10 hands up. Then I'll say, raise your hand if you've actually ever created a workaround to care for a patient. Almost all the hands go up. Then I say, if you've ever MacGyvered anything to care for a patient, raise your hand. Everybody's hands up, right? Because in nursing, we kind of call this, you do what you have to do to just care for the patient. However, that's being an innovator. So we really need to use the language and empower nurses to realize that they are all innovators, and it's great to be an innovator. In fact, we could teach people how to be innovators. So it's a very powerful skill set that we have.
Yes, exactly. Now, how did your past positions prepare you for your work at ANA and at WAMBI?
Yeah, that's a really good question. Yeah. So I think as nurses, we're very good at prioritizing because we're able to juggle a million things. And I hesitate to use the word multitask, but we can do a lot of different things and sequence them in generally the right order all the time. This is just what we do. It's how we're trained to think. We can
Mm-hmm.
also collect and process a lot of data and information, and we can, in our brains, iterate and just kind of rapid cycle test it very quickly. And if we need to, we can change it or evaluate it and tweak it and just kind of reformulate it, right? That's almost the design thinking process. So when we talk about innovation, we have a tremendous amount of empathy. We're able to define what the challenges are. We're able to ideate or problem solve and come up with ideas and then prototype and test them. So for me, many of the skills that we've all learned in the nursing process can be overlaid directly in design thinking or human-centered design. So for me, there were a lot of skill sets and competencies that I had that I didn't know fit together. So as I've matured in my career, I've been able to fit these pieces together much better. As you've said at the beginning of this, I've spent a lot of time doing coursework and getting degrees and certifications. Every one of them has benefited me. And I continue to do a tremendous amount of learning on my own, whether it be through Coursera or LinkedIn Learning or attending a ton of free workshops on technology, artificial intelligence, robotics, venture capital, private equity, any of those things, to really continue to keep myself relevant to what's going on in healthcare. I was the first vice president of innovation at the American Nurses Association, and that was an amazing opportunity to really help I crafted that framework to bring 4 million nurses into the innovation space. So through my previous roles as not only a bedside nurse, also as a nurse leader, a chief nurse executive, I was able to bring a lot of that structure and thought process together so that it could help me kind of formulate my future roles. Many of those pieces fit together very nicely. So the nursing process is very, very similar to design thinking. As those pieces came closer together for me, that began to make a lot more sense. Using things such as Coursera and LinkedIn Learning, along with the coursework that I've taken and certifications that I've pursued, I continue to invest a fair amount of time in education through free events or workshops at colleges, universities, or when I travel, I do a fair amount of speaking. So if there are really interesting topics, I will come early or sit there a little while to listen to those speakers as well, because I think it's incredibly important for us to continue to learn, especially about technology, because it is influencing our practice.
I know you get called out to speak at many different events and for many different types of things. How do you pull all that? Because that is, it kind of reminds me of myself. You're just all over the place.
Well, yes and no. It's all very focused though, right? Because all those previous roles have helped me pull together pieces of them to make sure that I can do what I'm doing today and have an incredibly powerful impact. So what's really neat about the job that I do today, I'm the Chief Clinical Officer at WAMBI, and I continue to speak and consult with organizations that also want to become more innovative. So for me, it's really a matter of using all those skills and competencies to share that passion with other people. Even at
I'm
WAMBI,
sure people call you from PCORI's universe still to work with them too.
Well, you know, PCORI was an amazing opportunity because they are doing, really trying to do a lot of work around bringing patients into that research process and the grant funding process. So they're doing some really neat stuff. And I was on that advisory board for 3 years. So that was a really neat experience with some very, very strong people there.
That's great. That's great. Now let's talk about this Manager's Guide to Intergenerational Workforce. I thought the book was amazing because we have so many age ranges in the workforce now, and it's going to get even greater as time passes because those of us who are over 60 are not leaving the workforce. Mm-hmm. So tell us a little about the book, because I want them to know about the book, and we're going to put up a link to the book for them. And tell us about your training that you do on intergenerational workforce and how they need to work together.
Yeah, so the book was written, it's actually a couple years old now. So I was just asked to think about revising it and writing a second edition of that. So I'm contemplating. We in nursing flipped from a boomer heavy workforce to a millennial heavy workforce in 2016. So we used to have 4 generations in the workforce. It used to be traditionalists and boomers and Xers and millennials. That's changed. Traditionalists are out of the workforce. Many boomers are already out of the workforce. However, as you said, people that are 65, 67, 60 are going to remain in the workforce for a while. And now certainly not only do we have millennials, we've also brought in Gen Z, right? So we have them in the workforce. So it's going to get to be very, very interesting. And as you know, every generation has very different styles and processes, communication, words, everything is different. Millennials, the younger millennials were literally born with technology in their hand. Zers were born, they had it perhaps in utero, they were exposed. But it really is a very, very different world. So learning how to communicate and learning the values and what's important, while we can't overly generalize and stereotype, there certainly are some principles that you can apply that can help you communicate better with different generations. So I have spoken a lot about that in the past, and nowadays what I do is I actually pull some of that into the work that I do on innovation.
Oh, that's great. That is great. Now, I know you have published on artificial intelligence and robotics in nursing, and I am excited about this topic, frankly. And I want you to share with us your vision of nursing using the emerging technologies, and how should nursing restructure its curriculum to address robotics and artificial intelligence?
Wow, those are 2 questions. So let me tackle them one at a time. You know, I happen to be one of the people that believes that we say today that we have over 1 million nurses short. That isn't going to stay that way. And in fact, I don't believe it's going to get worse. I think it's going to improve, because we're using the metrics of the way we provide care today as our yardstick, right? We know that we will continue to increase our ability to utilize artificial intelligence or augmented intelligence with predictive analytics in a way that will leverage us and be a force multiplier. So it's very, very likely, very, very possible, very probable that even in inpatient settings, we will have things such as a camera at the foot of every patient's bed. And maybe at the other ends of that camera, there will be a registered nurse that is observing multiple patients, very similar to what we know as an EICU concept. However, it could be on every patient in every bed. And then perhaps, since we can't make nurses out of sticks and mud, but perhaps we can leverage nurses because we are going to have the technology and the eyes and ears on them and the Bluetooth interface into their physiologic monitors and their Dynamaps and the temperature devices, and every measurement we take will go to someone on the other end of that camera or that TV. So basically, someone is continually processing that information so that we do get alerts and we know immediately not all of the bells and whistles and dinging that we don't respond to because we've become desensitized, but rather which are truly the ones that I need to pay attention to. And in fact, we know some roles are going to be replaced. We know that monitor techs are very likely to be eliminated, just like transcriptionists were. Right? Exactly. Everybody remembers in hospitals, physicians, at the time, physicians used to dictate something. It went through this phone device and someone on the other end actually typed it out. Then it went from physicians dictating through the phone to basically word processing. And instead of having I remember in my career, it was generally women who carried around stacks of papers with those little rubber things on their fingers and would flip through them and open the chart and stick them in the chart. That's all gone. Right? We've eliminated all of those roles because now you can pick up the phone. Any provider can pick up the phone. It's automatically through natural language processing, essentially transcribed, and it shows up in your EMR. It pops up. So there are roles that have already been eliminated. Monitor techs, incredibly important people. However, we actually have predictive analytics with artificial intelligence that are much more accurate and can be much more stable in terms of the accuracy that occurs as of that interface. So that's a role that's very, very likely to go away even in the next couple of years. When you have artificial intelligence looking at your patient's monitoring, it's going to not only identify the arrhythmias, it will be able to predict the arrhythmias. The same thing is true with sepsis. We'll be able to identify, and we actually can do this today. There are products on the market that are being used that can identify patients that are going to become septic before they even look remotely septic and before our human eyes or ears go, jeepers, something is going to be wacky with these labs. So we already have those technologies today. And that's essentially going to help us. It's going to make us stronger as a care providing team. And as a result, I think it will amplify us as a force, meaning that we probably will be able to not need 1 million more nurses because we now have technology to supplement us. Now, the other question you asked me is about curricula. So I think we have a tremendous opportunity, and I would say obligation, to change the way that we educate nurses, right? Exactly. There are many schools that are changing. However, generally speaking, we are probably behind the curve on that. So we have the, I think really the ability to dig into data science, artificial intelligence, analytics, not only what it does and what the outcome is, but also a little bit of how it works. At some point, nurses are going to need to know if my computer is saying that I should respond in this way because it's predicting something will happen, how do I know to trust that data? What happens if it's right? What happens if it's wrong? Those are conversations that I think we really need to have with young people becoming nurses. We need to put a lot more effort into the study of the ethics associated with predictive analytics, artificial intelligence. Robots are absolutely going to be supplementing us. They're going to be working alongside us as team members. They are not going to be replacing nurses, not for the long foreseeable future. However, they're going to support us. We already use them in hospitals as passing medications and linens and food trays and pharmacy items. They also will be used as hunters and gatherers to kind of fetch items and devices and things that we need, and they will be the ones to go get it for us. So absolutely going to be surrounded by technology.
Okay, so with that, we're going to have to change the scope and standards of practice as well.
You bet. You bet.
And then my question is, will there be a need for doctors with robotics?
That one I don't have as much of a handle on. There's two really good books that I like to refer to. One of them is called The Robots Are Coming, and the other one is called The Fourth Age. They're both very good reads, and they both address physicians and nurses. Nurses seem to be in a less risky position based on what they do than some of the things physicians do. Now, that's not true of all physicians, right? So, for example, radiologists and pathologists could potentially be those at more risk because of what they do. So anything that's very repetitive or redundant, those kind of task-based activities, even though they require much higher order thinking and processing, they still are repetitive tasks. So there are already things out there such as Google X-ray that is kind of a program that is really trying to ascertain how it can provide either support or even do radiology reading. It focused on pulmonary as it started this pilot. There are also different studies out there where they are using different AI and more accurately diagnosing cardiac disease, coronary artery disease, pulmonary tumors, things of that nature. So if we get to that point, while we can use it to supplement, there might be some time down the road that we have to ask ourselves, do we have people in the right jobs, in the right positions? The same questions are going to be asked in nursing. However, we provide a very unique role in that our jobs are not redundant. They're actually, while they're highly structured, they're very variant day to day, shift to shift. even for the same individual. So that actually affords us a lower risk of being replaced. So I think we certainly, to me, that says we certainly have many years. However, we are going to have to learn to work with technology and use it to help us and to supplement the work that we do. We are the ones that are closest to patients, so we definitely want to make sure that we're the translator in the conversation with the patients and their families.
Yes, and we also want to make sure that it's the best technology for the patient.
You bet.
Yeah, because right now, you know, it's kind of like it's no real testing of the technology in the same way we would do the FDA types of pharmaceutical tests.
Well, there is, however, it's a moving target. So they're really sort of branching out and very, very quickly trying to get the right kinds of technology tested. It's a little bit like the Wild West, though, right now, right? We're trying to figure out what should be tested and what shouldn't, and how long do you test, and how do you know that something really works? So that's really kind of a moving target for us. And your first point was actually a very good point, and that is, in nursing, we have to get more involved in the design and development of technology, not just down the road when it's already been purchased and we're asked to be the super users and train people. Because as we can be involved in the design and development, that's where we can really make sure that it fits in properly with workflows and it really makes sense for the goals we're trying to accomplish.
Yes. So what do you think the future holds with this new and expanding technology?
Oh, you know what? I am excited as heck by this. So I think it's going to be awesome. So I mean, I really do think that certainly for people that are more tech confident and more tech comfortable, the future is very, very bright. We're going to have to learn how to incorporate technology and work with it. And that doesn't just mean the tech that we see in hospitals and in clinics. There are so many wearables that are on the market, and patients, we're going to be educating patients on how to use these, how to gather the data out of these. It's really going to be an incredibly dynamic, changing environment for all of us to figure this stuff out. Even our phones are little mini computers. So when patients are using phones to gather information, whether it's around, you know, diet management, nutrition, glucometer monitoring, arrhythmia monitoring, medication compliance, we need to be able to understand how to help them use that and what that means to their care in an overall way.
Yeah, the Blues are talking about doing a home ICU.
Yes, so, yes.
Yeah.
That's 100% true. I've actually met some physicians who now have a practice where they provide intermediate level care in patients' homes. And they do that by the local home health agency actually rents out ICU beds and the ventilators and suction and all of that equipment. And then they have basically what looks like a little bit of a robot with kind of a tablet on it, whereas the physician or the nurse practitioner or the PA can pop in and out at any time to assess the patient, while there might be either a home tech aide there 24/7 or even a nurse that pops in and out to accompany the in-home home health aide. So there are a variety of models right now that are being piloted, but care is moving out of brick and mortar.
Yes. Okay. Well, Dr. Bonnie, thank you for your time, and hopefully we'll get to interview you next year when we get into our studio. But thank you for taking the time out of your busy schedule to interview with us.
It's my pleasure.
We appreciate the work you're doing and want others to know your perspective on technology and nurses. For more information on Dr. Clipper, Nurses and Innovation, please feel free to go to our website, www.carsonco.net, and click on Let's Talk or Dr. Clipper's photograph, where you will be able to access this interview and links to her work and articles on nursing and innovation. Our next interview will be with Jonathan Nelson, a former ER nurse and the founder and CEO of Hackers and Founders. the largest global network of tech founders. Hackers and Founders events have been held in 145 cities, 45 countries, and over 300 hackers and founders have attended these events. It's amazing what an ER nurse manager can do. We have an exciting schedule of interviews and programs. If you enjoyed this episode of Let's Talk and are interested in following us, please like us on Facebook, subscribe to us, or leave us a positive rating on Apple Podcasts, or follow us on Blog Talk Radio. Our videos can be found on YouTube on the Let's Talk Nursing channel. Let's Talk Conversations in NP Practice are a part of the Let's Talk Nursing channel.
That was great. Thank you very much, Winifred. Have a great day.
Thank you.
Take care. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.